Imagine hiring a new employee. He is strong, hardworking, and quiet. He works harder than anyone else. You trust him with your shop. You trust him with your family. But you don't know that his name is Iancu Berilă. And in 1940s, Romania, hiring him was a death sentence. This is the untold story of a serial killer who murdered 20 people just for money, and the legendary Iron Commissioner who finally hunted him down. Welcome back to Echo of the Millennia, the channel where we uncover the darkest secrets and the most incredible stories from history that you won't find in textbooks. I am your host, and today we are traveling to the dark underworld of World War II, Bucharest. If you love true crime and forgotten history, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Now let's meet the monster known as the Baker Killer. To truly understand how a giant like Berilă could vanish, you have to understand the unique madness of Bucharest in this era. Before the war, they called it Little Paris. But by the 1940s, it was more like the Chicago of the Balkans. The city was a pressure cooker. You had German soldiers, Russian spies, American air raids, and a collapsing monarchy all in one place. The blackout regulations meant the city was plunged into total darkness every night to avoid bombers. For a predator like Berilă, this was a gift. He didn't need to be stealthy. The war provided the cover. While the police were busy hunting political dissidents and spies, common murder became easy. In the noise of air raid sirens, nobody hears a scream. Berilă wasn't just a killer. He was a symptom of a society that was falling apart. Poverty was everywhere. The police force was overwhelmed with deserters and starving refugees, and in the dark alleys, gangs ruled the streets. In this chaos, criminals thrived. But most of them were simple thieves, pickpockets, smugglers. Nobody was prepared for a predator who hunted in the silence. Iancu Berilă wasn't a genius criminal mastermind, he was a brute. Physically, he was terrifying. Over 6 feet tall, incredibly muscular, a beast of burden. But his strategy was cunningly simple. He used the ultimate disguise, hard work. His method, his modus operandi was always the same, and it was terrifyingly effective. He would travel to a new town or a new district, usually on the outskirts of the city. He would find a bakery looking for help. Bakeries were perfect targets. They were cash businesses. They kept money in the shop to buy flour, and critically, the owners usually lived in the back of the shop with their families. Berilă would get hired immediately. Why? Because he looked like the perfect worker. He didn't drink, he didn't argue. He would carry sacks of flour that 2 normal men couldn't lift. He would work like a slave for weeks, gaining their trust, eating at their table, playing with their children. He was learning where the money was hidden. He was memorizing the layout of the house. He was waiting for the perfect night, usually a rainy one to cover the noise. Let's reconstruct one of his crimes to understand the horror. It is 1939. Galati. A baker named Mandra hires Berilă. For weeks, everything is normal. But one night, while the family is sleeping, the perfect employee wakes up. He doesn't reach for a gun. Guns are loud. He reaches for his tools of the trade, a baker's knife, or sometimes a heavy iron bar used for the ovens. He didn't just rob them. He eliminated every single witness. The owners, their wives, sometimes even their children. Police reports from the time describe scenes of absolute horror. He struck with such force that survival was impossible. He wanted to make sure nobody could ever identify him. And the scariest part? After the slaughter, he wouldn't run in a panic. He was cold, calculated. Sometimes he would sleep in the house, next to the bodies until morning. He would eat their food. Then he would take the money, the jewelry, and even the sacks of flour and vanish into the war-torn country. For years, he was a ghost. The police were baffled. There were no fingerprints on file, no witnesses left alive, just a trail of dead bakers stretching across Romania. The newspapers began to panic. They called him the Beast. The police needed a hunter, someone who was just as dangerous as the killer. Enter Eugen Alimănescu. In the history of crime fighting, there are cops, and then there is the Iron Commissioner. Let's talk about the man who hunted the beast. Eugen Alimănescu wasn't your typical police officer. He looked more like a gangster than a cop. He wore a trench coat, a fedora, and he drove huge American cars. He formed the Brigada Fulgur, the Lightning Squad. They were famous for using submachine guns instead of pistols. Alimănescu had a brutal philosophy called the operational solution. It worked like this. If they caught a dangerous criminal, they wouldn't always arrest him. They would drive him to the edge of the city. The report the next day would always say the same thing. The suspect attempted to escape and was shot while fleeing. It was brutal. It was illegal. But in a city overrun by crime, the public loved him. They saw him as an avenging angel. So when Berilă started killing bakers, Alimănescu didn't just see a case. He saw a challenge to his authority. Alimănescu realized that standard police work would fail. Berilă had no home, no address, no friends. He was a drifter. So the commissioner decided to track the only thing Berilă cared about: the loot. Berilă didn't just steal money, he stole goods, clothes, flour, things he could sell on the black market. Alimănescu activated his vast network of informants, snitches, beggars, and street urchins. He told them, "Look for a giant, a man selling baker supplies who isn't a baker." Finally, a tip came in. In the port city of Berilă, a massive man was trying to sell stolen grain and clothes. He fit the description. Alimănescu didn't wait for a warrant. He gathered his lightning squad and drove through the night. They tracked the suspect to a sleazy, cheap hotel near the docks. The tension was high. They knew this man was a monster who could crush a skull with his bare hands. Alimănescu gave the order. They didn't knock. They kicked down the door with guns drawn. They found the beast asleep. Under his pillow, the weapon that had taken 20 lives. Berilă tried to reach for it, but he was staring down the barrels of the Lightning Squad's guns. For the first time in his life, the predator became the prey. Iancu Berilă was in chains before he fully woke up. The interrogation was chilling. Berilă didn't cry. He didn't beg. He confessed everything with a terrifying calmness. His reason for the murders? Simple greed. He wanted the money. He felt no remorse for the families he destroyed. In a different time, Alimănescu might have ended him right there. But Berilă was sentenced to life in hard labor in the salt mines of Slanik Prahova. Life in these mines was designed to break a man. Imagine descending hundreds of meters underground into a world of eternal twilight. The air is thick with salt dust that burns your lungs and dries out your skin. Prisoners didn't have machines. They had pickaxes. They had to carve massive blocks of salt, called bolovani, from the walls, lift them onto carts, and push them. It was back-breaking work. Most men died of exhaustion or respiratory failure within a few years. But Berilă? He thrived. Records suggest that while other prisoners collapsed, Berilă would ask for more work. Psychologists today might look at this and see a man who wasn't just greedy, but completely devoid of humanity. A machine made of meat. He didn't care if he was killing a family or breaking rocks. To him, it was all just work. Even today, almost 100 years later in Romania, there is a saying, "He works like Berilă." People use it as a compliment to describe someone who works incredibly hard. Most of them have no idea that they are comparing themselves to one of the most brutal serial killers in history, a man who used his strength not to build but to destroy. Iancu Berilă died in prison, exhausted by the labor that defined his life. He is a forgotten monster in the West. But in the archives of Bucharest, his file remains one of the darkest chapters of the Iron Commissioner's career. The man who baked bread by day and butchered by night. If you enjoyed this untold story from the archives of history, make sure to like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments, do you have a local legend or a criminal from your country that the world needs to hear? Thanks for watching Echo of the Millennia. Until next time, goodbye.